All right, Bang Bang. Today is Tuesday, December 8th. Welcome to the Dog Walk presented by Barstool Sports. As always, I'm here with Chief. Chief, how are we doing today?
Feel great. Feeling getting back to normal here, back on this schedule. This is a little bit more kind of out there tinfoily subject, which I like, so I'm excited for this episode.
There we go. Outfoil. So what did we this was also suggested a lot, right? We've gotten this a few times. It's also been a topic of conversation on Rogan. So it's going to be fun to dive into it.
Yeah, and we talked about it a little bit with Donnie. When Donnie was in town in August, I think we did all like that history kind of grab bag episode or two, and this kind of came up, but we didn't really do that deep of a dive. It was kind of like a cursory or whatever throwaway comment. But this Stoned Ape Theory about human evolution it's fucking fascinating to me, and also kind of plausible, in my opinion. It makes sense to me.
All right, so the Stoned Ape Theory, here we go.
Yeah, so I think, with something like this, you can't even really start at the beginning of the theory. You almost have to go back even further to kind of set the stage for what it means to have this kind of rapid evolution. And I when you ever talk about like ancient history, I have a really hard time conceptualizing how fucking long things were in between. But I do want to go back all the way to like the time of the dinosaurs almost, because that's when the earliest known human descendant was found. So like they can match DNA, match all these things, and it doesn't look anything like a human. It's this thing called a Eutherian, and it looks almost like a possum or a rat. But this was the precursor for all mammals, was this fucking rat thing that existed, or like a shrew that existed 145 million years ago. And that thing is our descendant. It's a descendant of like most mammals and like marsupials on the planet, including like whales. So when you talk about like how things evolved, they go from like a single cell organism, hundreds of millions of years ago or billions of years ago, to fungus, to multicell, intelligent animals, intelligent in quotes, to what we are today. It's fucking crazy. And, we've seen like, the asteroid wipes out the dinosaurs, but somehow mammals and this thing live. And then it spurs and like that thing starts learning how to swim. And then, it just goes on and on and on until, we're sitting here in 2020. But there's been like unbelievable catastrophes and like things that happen by chance that lead us to where we are today. And so when you talk about like the development of humans, like we're the only animal like us, and if we evolved from something that was a fucking rat to what we are today, something substantial had to happen to us in our brains that allowed us to be sitting here talking into a microphone. And that's where this kind of stoned ape theory comes in, because how do you make a jump from something that was a chimp, or further back than that, a rat, into a couple of guys talking here, people listening all over the world on the internet? Like how, like, it just blows your mind if you think about it that way. Like, we were a rat, then we were a chimp, now we're still fucking chimps, you and I sitting here, but like we're a sophisticated species. It's crazy.
Yeah, and then we got Neanderthals like White Sox Dave walking around.
Yeah. 2% of all humans on the planet still have Neanderthal DNA.
Explain that. I don't even understand what the fuck that means.
It's great. I mean, so if you have your DNA, right? You know what DNA is, and it gives you your eye color, your hair. My brother was like, Eddie's got better hair than you. It's like, fuck you,
How
Eddie.
about that? That's a narrative being spread on Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, I spread it, but many people, like, I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw, like, what are you talking about?
A lot of people say a new sheriff in town, but continue. Neanderthal 2%.
But so like Neanderthals were another kind of subsect of human that branched off at one point, or maybe even predated humans, and then humans met them and interbreeded with them, but also killed them off. Like, we're savages, so we killed them off, but we also had sex and bred with them. So somewhere along the way, and there's another group called the Denisovans that were in Russia, but they have pretty close descendants with people who are native to like, or indigenous people to Australia. So it's like there's all kinds of movement and killing, and people going extinct, but interbreeding enough so like the DNA is preserved. So that's how that works. So it's just like there are certain characteristics like I know like your eyebrow, like if you have like that ridge on your eyebrow, that's supposedly a marker of having Neanderthal DNA, but they're very similar to humans, just a little like slight physical features that are different, but their DNA still can be passed down and exists today.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that was like,
there you go.
But that was probably like 50, 60,000 years ago. The thing that we're talking about, the earliest humans existed like the way we think of humans today. I think the oldest fossil ever found was 300,000 years old, 3 to 400,000 years old in Africa. And if you look at that, those fossils versus what existed in chimps 200, when we split off, our brain size doubled. So you go from, you're talking about White Sox Dave still has Neanderthal DNA, and that's still a thing that exists, and there's not a lot of physical changes over 50,000 years. So now if you go over a period of time of, there's some speculations as short as 200,000 years. Some say it's 2 million. But in the grand scheme of things, this is what I'm talking about, where it's hard to conceptualize time. That's a snap of the finger. Like that is to have the human brain double in size in what is considered scientifically, geologically, all evolutionarily, a blink of the eye on how long it takes for real change to happen. It's very significant and unexplained. So people have been trying to explain this jump in human development, human consciousness, all that sort of thing for a long time. And one guy in particular, and his brother also. And
sorry, did you say that the fossil found 300,000 years ago, that was, how similar was it then?
I mean, it's a smaller person.
Okay.
It's like smaller stature, but in terms of brain size and what they would deem like how they are cognitively, like how they think and things like that, the way the brain functions, very similar to humans.
Oh, okay.
So like that's like the first, like that's a human.
All right.
Like you yourself could go back in time and have sex with this human, and you would produce like a child.
Interesting.
So it's not like you're, it's just a different thing.
Okay.
It's just a different time period, but still a human. And if you think about, and then so these guys, Terence McKenna and Dennis McKenna. Terence McKenna's dead. I want to say he died in the early 2000s, but he was a botanist. He went to Cal Berkeley. He also fucking loved psychedelics and experimenting with psychedelics, and he wrote a book about how to grow them and things like that. And this was like, in the 60s and 70s when psychedelics and drugs were becoming a greater part of, I guess it was like an underbelly or, this other culture in the United States where like there was a war on drugs, but then people were doing a lot of drugs. Like you think of like Woodstock and things like that. People were experimenting with drugs, but he was experimenting with them, not even recreationally, but as a real scientist. And he kind of developed this theory, and someone recently explained to me that there's a difference between a theory and a hypothesis. I think you can test a hypothesis rather. I think you can test a theory. You can't test a hypothesis. What is
hypothesis?
That? Thank you. I said I was feeling good today. Maybe I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm all getting tongue-tied.
It's like 7th grade science fair shit, Chief.
Yeah, thank you. So, hypothesis.
Oh, regroup,
yeah.
Okay? How about regroup for a second?
Okay.
How about this? Because I'm going to talk to you about JP Graziano. Well, Chief, regroups, okay?
Mm-hmm.
We all need to regroup. We all need to come together. It's a tough time. So why not order some JP Grazianos to celebrate a little bit, okay? Obviously, the holidays are coming up. And who knows how it's going to look, with social distancing and, smaller gatherings. It's, Thanksgiving that wasn't recommended to travel. Well, just don't forget JP here and what they can help you out with to make the Christmas feel as normal as possible. They still got the catering trays. And, maybe it's something where you're like, hey, I can't make it over there, but I want to send them, a catering tray. I want to send them. I want to have my little catering tray here, and while I sit on the Zoom, I'll give them. We'll both have the same catering tray.
Yeah, you're gonna cheers with some prosciutto. I mean,
yeah, so you're still
Zoom,
breaking bread over some JP Grazianos.
Yeah.
So go do that. Go to jpgraziano.com. You can put in your pre-order for a catering tray, whatever size it may be. It doesn't matter if you have a small family, large family, or however you're breaking up here this Christmas. So just go do it, jpgraziano.com. You can get any sandwich you want, Mr. G, turkey. It doesn't matter. Just go do it. Go check it out and celebrate with some JPs at jpgraziano.com. Pre-order as soon as possible, and they'll have it ready for you, and it's going to be a great meal. Okay, Chief, are we regrouped? Do we feel better?
I feel better. So
Okay,
let's get into
hypothesis.
this, what the actual hypothesis is around this. I think I said it wrong again, around this Stoned Ape Theory. Okay, so the theory that Terence McKenna has is that primates, our ancestors were living in the jungles of Africa. And back then, because the way the climate was, there were way more of these tropical jungles like the Amazon and these in the Congo and Africa, where they're just forests and trees and everything. And that's a great place to live if you're a monkey. And if you look around the planet right now, even still, most primates, the traditional primates, gorillas, chimps, all that, they live in these tropical areas because there's just an abundance of food, right? Like, it's everywhere you look, there's fucking figs and dates and fruits and all these leaves and things like that, things that you can eat. And we went through a climate change. They say, maybe like 200 million years ago, maybe less, but somewhere around that, where over a long period of time, all of Africa that had been largely jungle started to become more grasslands. So if you think of like savannas in Africa now, where you do these safaris, you see all the wildlife, that map in northern Africa, which is now the Sahara, became a grassland, and these other places in grassland. So you had this natural range of primates that they were living in trees, and then the trees over time kept like shrinking. The forest kept shrinking because of climate change. So there were higher competition and population density among primates in those forests, because it was just like, we live in the forest, what are we going to do? So these early predated humans started being like, wow, we got to start walking out into the grasslands, because that's where we live now, and come down from the trees and look for new sources of food. So there are all these things, like the classification of animals called an ungulate, but it's basically any hooved animal. So you're thinking elephants, deer, buffalo, descendants of cows, things like that. They're walking around and they're taking these massive, cow pie dumps everywhere. And if you're an early primate, you're used to like the Lion King, where you're eating grub out of like dead logs and shit. So that where you can find bugs is often you find shit like scat. You find that in the savannah, you turn it over, and you can find worms and things like that if you're like an early chimp human thing to eat. And one of the other things they found growing in this ungulate shit were these fat, juicy, fleshy mushrooms. So that were filled with basically psilocybin. So these early primates were walking out into the savannah and looking for food, and they would find these mushrooms, and they're like, let's just eat these fucking mushrooms. And they would trip their balls off. Like, they would have like this psychedelic reaction for the first time. And that is something that people think unlocked the growth and development of the human brain as we know it today. Because psilocybin and these mushrooms, and it's still like, this is a real thing that's been tested. So if you talk about people that have PTSD and this and that, it's psychedelics are becoming something that's prescribed for people coming back from war. They give them MDMA, they give them psilocybin, and it's because it activates neurogenesis. So you're going to have like new pathways develop in your brain from eating these types of mushrooms. You're going to have like these new neurons form. Like I said, new pathways of knowledge. It also, and this is where the PTSD thing comes in, it reduces fear. So one thing that people look to when they're talking about, like the human brain developed like crazy. Well, people say that it was another big step towards that was the use of fire to cook food. So to cook meat, to cook food, the mastering of fire. But if you put fire near any other animal, even today on Earth, it scares the fucking shit out of them, right? Wolves, lions, whatever it is. Everybody just runs away from fire still, because it's like, fire's fucking scary. It's hot, burns the shit out of you, kills you. The smoke inhalation can kill you. It can kill you in 1,000 different ways. But if you're on psilocybin all the time, it reduces your PTSD and allows you to go back and tackle some of these other factors. And that they think that is probably being able to have this reduced fear center allowed the people to start mastering things like fire. It also allowed them to think in geometry. So like, if you're like, that deer is running over there, I'm never going to catch it, but I might be able to throw a spear or a rock or something and hit it in the fucking head
to where it's going.
Yeah. And so you're seeing like 3-dimensionally. They're also saying like this is how humans kind of discovered the future, where it's like if I can have long-term success if I make sacrifices now. So like other animals, like a lion, they take down a wildebeest or something. They just rip that thing to shreds and get every ounce of meat out off of it as soon as they can. 99% of animals on the planet act the same way. Squirrels will put nuts away for the winter and things like that. But most animals, when they kill something and they're eating everything they can until they're stuffed right then. And humans were able to conceptualize the idea of sacrificing the present for long-term stability in the future.
Wait, going back here really quick, okay? So we'll get back to that, to the stability of the future. But what was the major factor that led to the climate change back then? Do you know?
They don't really know. There could be a lot of different things. It could be, same things that are impacting us now with the exception of fossil fuels. So a lot of people think that the climate is just cyclical, right? So we've had times where the whole planet has been a ball of ice. We've had other times where it's radically the other way, where the whole planet is more tropical and jungle-like. We've had you've heard of Pangea, right? Where it was like a supercontinent. Okay, well, that if you have a supercontinent or the continents are shaped or the continents are placed differently and these land masses are placed differently, you're going to have jet streams that change the course of weather. You might have a more active, sunburst, so you're going to have more radiation coming from the sun to heat the planet. You could have, impacts like we saw with the dinosaurs, and maybe we talked about like 12,000 years ago, the end of the Pleistocene era, where you have these impacts. You remember when they had a volcano go off in Iceland, maybe 8-10 years ago?
Somewhat.
Vaguely, when they had to shut down travel from all of Europe because planes can't fly through this. Well, there's been other times where there've been these massive volcanoes or earthquakes, like at Yellowstone or something like that, and it just ejects so much debris into the atmosphere that the whole planet is kind of clouded. So the planet cools because the sun is just reflected and blocked off by all the moisture in the air or the extra, like the sand and dust particles in the air, like light can't penetrate through. So the planet becomes less tropical. So in terms of this time, I don't know exactly what triggered it, but there's many things that could trigger it and have historically. And they know that it was this way from like ice core samples and just different like fossils and things like that. They know that the planet was more tropical and then went through this change. They also know from fossils that they found that these psychedelic mushrooms did exist in that area where humans were going to be walking around, like early humans or ancestors of humans would be walking around at that same time.
So is this like the big thing that the climate change deniers reference?
I think it's part of their argument, and I think the counter argument to the climate change deniers is that we've never seen such rapid increase in temperature without a cataclysm. So we've never seen it fluctuate without a fucking asteroid hitting, or we've never seen it, or the other way without a giant volcano. So like Krakatoa, they said there was like a mini ice age. I'm going to get the dates wrong, but there was like a giant volcano that erupted. I think this Krakatoa is in like the South Pacific Ocean, and that caused, they call it like a mini ice age in the 1800s, where they developed, they used to say that England, maybe it was earlier than that, but England and Germany used to be big on growing grapes and wine as well. And then there was this Krakatoa, this big event. I might have the volcano wrong too, because this was not the purpose of this podcast. But
I know. Sorry,
but it's an interesting thing. But the reason that Germany and England and Ireland went from being these places that would drink wine to places that were more commonly associated with beer and liquor is because grapes would no longer grow in that area. So they were like, we still need to get fucked up. We better figure out a new way to get fucked up. So they developed vodka in the colder areas like Sweden, Russia, place like that, bourbon and beer, or whiskey, scotch, beer, and in other places where they would always just drink wine historically. Like you think of Game of Thrones, always drinking scotch. I know that's fictional, but same thing. Like everything was just a little bit more Mediterranean in climate, like Greece and Rome.
Yeah.
And then when things changed, they had to go into making these other sorts of alcohols.
Yeah, and sorry, my last off-topic thing here, but we should talk about the the volcano that's supposed to erupt. I forget what it's called.
The super volcanoes, Yellowstone.
We should talk about that, and then we should talk about the fault lines in California, because that's
scary shit.
Yes, scary shit. And now, like, my radar is going off, because I know people that like want to make that move, but they won't, because I actually know someone I used to work with. His wife is like, you know, super into that, like maybe a geology major or something, and she refuses to move there because she's so convinced it's going to happen.
To like Yellowstone or California?
California, like the fault lines and the earthquake and all that shit.
Well, you should tell this woman or anybody who's concerned about that, if that shit blows, I don't think it matters where you live.
No.
I think it's going to be like, we're all fucking dead.
I mean, and it just got me to thinking, because I haven't thought about it. But if there's no better time for that thing to blow than the year of 2020.
I can't remember who tweeted it out, but there was like this image of basically the Earth like disintegrating, like, and it was like this rapid fire was spreading in like a circle, all covering the globe. And the tweet was, "What would you do if this was, you know, happening? What would you do?" And I'd be like, "Die." Like everyone's just fucking dead.
It'd be over.
Right. So I would probably just not do anything and just sit there and wait to die.
Yeah. Hey, let's take a quick break here. Let's talk about our friends at JP Graziano's Chief. JP's, if you were to get a catering tray, how do you think you'd attack it? What do you think you'd get?
I think you got to get, well, what's the event?
The event, of course, is going to be Christmas, Christmas Eve.
So I'm so glad you asked, because I actually last year didn't know that they had the catering trays. Maybe I wasn't listening to the ads closely enough. JP Graziano sent me away with 2. I was the star of Christmas. So we had some sandwiches cut out. We had the the meats, the cheeses, the olives, the whole thing. I show up with that thing, and they're like, "You are actually contributed to Christmas?" And I'm like, "Yep, all my idea." And in reality, Jim just sent me out there with like the best catering tray anyone's ever seen.
Yeah, it's impressive. It's truly an impressive, you know, it's
star.
Impressive.
It's a star tray.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's very impressive. And like I said, you're dealing with a family here. You're dealing with a local business. Just call Jim. Go to jpgraziano.com, and they'll help you out. Call the store. And, you know, say, hey, you know, Christmas is a little different. Can I package it this way? I'm sure they'll be able to work something out with you.
They're the best about that. And you're like, hey, I'll come pick it up. They'll have it ready for you. You just put that order in. You call them on the phone, and then, you know, you can kind of customize it the way that you see fit. So Jim takes care of you. You should take care of him and your family.
Exactly.
Do the right thing.
That's jpgraziano.com. Phone number is 312-666-4587 if you want to call, get some more information. But just go get those catering trays, folks, and have a nice Christmas. All right, let's get back into the episode. But sorry, I did that roundabout distraction.
Well, I like those types of things.
Yes.
So, yeah. So those are things that could cause climate change in a more rapid succession, where like the evolution of species can't necessarily keep up with the changing climate, so they're forced to kind of go outside of their comfort zone. That's why I never really get too bent out of shape about climate change. I always just take, like, I think it's real. I also just think we'll figure it out. So I don't think it's like this doom and gloom thing. Like it's going to be bad. We'll have to like figure, like, we're smart. We'll figure out a way to like slow it down or have better infrastructure or whatever. And it's just let Darwinism kind of take its place with these other things. I think we'll be fine.
Okay. And I just figured, like, to me, someone who just follows this shit like from very, very far away, someone would be like, climate change, what the fuck? Like there was fossil fuels back then. Like,
there's all sorts of different things.
There was no way there's what I mean, of course.
Obviously. The fossil fuels were like forming, because that's all like dead shit that sinks into the earth, becomes oil and whatever. So
sorry, back to that. So you're having this climate
change, which forces them to eat these mushrooms. And I was going through the other things. It also helps with eyesight, so that'll help you be a hunter as well. They say mental acuity, the development of language. So if you think of like how monkeys and things talk now, it's like ooh, that kind of thing. Now it's like, my name's Bob. You know, so we went from being like this to being able to speak and talk on a podcast. Like, monkeys can't do that shit. Like, there's something triggered our ability to develop language that also helped us spread, think of tools, because it's like, you're not, like a squirrel will harvest and collect nuts like almost instinctually, right? Like, it just does it, where it's like, hey, Ed, this is how you hunt. And you tell your children, or you tell your guy next to you, and you can pass on knowledge that is just like retained. And then you eventually develop how to even write. So that's something like the development of language, I think, is very, very important. In addition, like I said, to tools, geometry. They also say psilocybin makes you fucking horny. So I've actually never done it, but they say that it'll make you hornier. So you're going to have more people having sex. And the difference between, one of the big differences between like traditional chimps and other monkeys and humans is female sexual selection. So chimps, a female chimp will fuck anything. Like if she's in heat, she'll take the lowliest, rattiest chimp in the clan and she'll still have sex with him. It's the reason that there's like a hierarchy is the dominant male will chase away the other male. So really only he gets to have sex with the females. But humans, the females really do all the choosing. So the males kind of compete and the females will, human females will like skim off the top. Like they'll just get the top ones. So if you're somebody who has like no fear, you're mastering fire, you're coming up with tools, you're providing food, like you're seen as a leader, you're going to have more females wanting to have sex with you and procreate with you. And that will trigger an even more rapid development of the human brain, because now it's like you're selecting for these chimps, these humans that will have an understanding and the knowledge of fire, a knowledge of language. So it's like you can talk to that girl, be like, you should come home with me. This guy's got fucking rocks for brains. I'm going to be able to give you food. And so he can literally physically talk to her in ways that maybe other people can't, and communicate with her in ways other early primates couldn't. So that was like, we broke off from chimps rapidly and became this other human species, and Neanderthals too probably. And they think that that was all triggered by these mushrooms, and then females' ability to choose, as opposed to just they'll sleep with anybody. So it's the female sexual selection, fire, and mushrooms all kind of working together to bring us to this point where we're developing a gene deep difference between us and early primates.
Now, I guess we're to the point where I say, what about this is not believable? What about this is just a theory? What about this is be like, oh, I kind of buy into this one. It sounds all pretty plausible now.
It sounds very plausible to me. There's no way to ever really prove it. So that's one of those things. The other thing that people will say is that now if you think of chimps or gorillas, like gorillas are these massive things. You know what gorillas do all day? They sit around and they chew leaves, because they have to chew and chew and chew and break it down because they don't have the ability to cook food. So we developed the ability to cook food, and that allowed our stomachs to shrink because they worked more efficiently with less energy, and our brains to grow. So it's like, it's not just the mushroom, but people can make an argument that even without the mushroom, if they had developed the use of fire for cooking and cooking meat, which is way more nutrient dense than a leaf, then that will allow your brain to grow more quickly too. That would be the counter argument, being like, all of this could have happened without mushrooms. That would be the counter argument. Like they discovered fire and that was more important, which it may have been, but maybe you never even approached the fire unless you had the mushrooms, because you don't have this shrunken fear response. You don't have the PTSD associated with being burned. You're like, I can go back and do that again and do it better. And I'll have a stick and get the stick on fire where the bottom of it's not, I'm just not just holding the fire. Like there's ways to like master the fire, and maybe we're the only primates to master the fire because our ancient ancestors had this access and propensity to eat psilocybin mushrooms.
Can I give you, here's kind of my mind fuck right now.
Mm-hmm.
And this might be fucking incredibly stupid, but if I was a stoner, I would really look into this. So you say how these animals were afraid of fire, and I still feel even like the babies, like, no, to stay away. Why would human babies walk right into a stove?
I don't know, man. Why wouldn't they do it?
They like human babies.
They probably do approach it, but that's a thing where it's like.
But I feel like a baby, wolf, would know to stay away.
Yeah, but that's good. That's a good
weird.
point.
It's
but
weird.
The baby might approach the fire once and get burned, and not go back. That could be a thing. But if you think of they just develop differently. You ever watch a cow be born, or some other animal like that get born? They pop out and then they're up and running like within 2 minutes.
Yeah.
They have a
different starting point.
Different starting point. They have a longer gestation period typically, and like we're just fucking doughy bags of milk. Like it just takes us a long time takes us like 18 to 20 something years for humans to be like a fully functioning adult, where other animals, like they don't have that luxury of like a two-parent or this system where they're going to be protected. It's like, hey, like there's lions over there, you better be able to run. Like, so you better come out of the womb running. And it's like that's like got to be an evolutionary thing too.
Yeah.
Where they instinctually learn things more quickly than humans do. But
For
we
sure,
end up higher. Yeah. So it's an interesting thought.
For whatever reason, I'm just thinking, I'm like, man, that's so crazy how they know that. They have the whatever, but I don't know. And then I also, your other point there that I want to touch on was, it'd be so interesting to have a linguistics person on.
Oh, I know.
You know, we should look into that, because I feel like we could sit there with that guy or girl and just talk forever. You know, just forever. Yeah. Because I'm sure there's extensive research done about what that ooh, ah, ah is.
Right. And it was probably something. It's probably something, but it's not like I think we've talked, it's like one of my favorite facts. We talked about coyotes. Like they howl, and they howl like one of the purposes of that howl is to like measure the coyote population density in a particular area, and that will trigger how many, I don't know how it works, no one really does, but that'll trigger some sort of reaction that will, if there's a lot of coyotes around, the female might have 2 pups. If there's only 1 coyote around in that area, she'll have 7. So it's like there are like that's a type of language that causes a metabolic reaction during procreation. For coyotes, like there's got to be something to that, to the way other primates communicate, that we took it beyond that to now I can say like my name is, we're talking into a podcast, I have a name, like when we've developed this language, and it's like who the fuck knows where that came from. I'd like to do a podcast on the Tower of Babel or Babel or whatever, it's where it's like everybody was speaking one language, and then the fable is like God knocked down their tower that they were building because it was like, and scattered everybody around the world, and then everybody started speaking different languages. Like there's got to be something to that too. Like that to me is like an interesting story, and there's you could say that like the whole too big to fail thing, maybe it's so big it has to fail.
Yeah,
there's all sorts of interesting offshoots we could do from this.
It's got to be someone at University of Chicago or Northwestern or something that we could talk to.
Someone way smarter than us.
Yes, exactly. So we could look into that. But no, that was very interesting. This was a fun show. So thank you, Chief. Is that pretty much it?
I think that's it. I mean, it probably could go on forever, but that's it for me for today.
Yeah. All right, awesome. Thanks everybody for listening. That's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll see you then.